When you've spent half your life serving your country, you think you understand loyalty. You think you know what betrayal feels like. But nothing, not war, not loss, not death, prepares you for the day your own son looks you in the eye and says you're no longer part of his life. I'm Major Daniel Carter, retired. 22 years in the Army, 3 tours overseas, medals, scars, nightmares, the whole package. I thought I'd faced everything a man could face. But that morning, betrayal came not from an enemy line. It came from my living room. It started with a phone call. I had just finished mowing the lawn when I decided to call my son Michael to ask about his wedding date. He'd been engaged for months to a girl named Emma. Sweet voice, polite smile, always said Mr. Carter when we met. I thought she was good for him. I even helped them with a down payment for their apartment, 20 grand from my pension savings. So when I picked up the phone that morning, I wasn't expecting a battle. "Hey, Mike," I said cheerfully, "your old man needs to know when to rent a tux. When's the big day?" There was silence. Then Emma's voice came through, not my son's, calm, cold, calculated. "Oh, we actually got married yesterday," she said, almost casually. "We only invited special people." Special people. The words hit harder than a mortar blast. For a few seconds I didn't even breathe. My hand tightened on the phone. "You got married? Yesterday? And you didn't tell me?" Emma chuckled lightly, as if it were a joke. "It was small, private. You know how stressful big weddings are. We just wanted to keep it intimate." Intimate. That word felt like a knife, because I knew what intimate meant. I saw the photos later that night on social media. Emma in her white dress, her parents smiling, holding champagne glasses, her brother giving a toast, even a few friends from her college. But not me. Not the man who paid their rent for 2 years. Not the man who bought them furniture, helped fix their car, and transferred money every time they said they were struggling. I wasn't invited, because I wasn't special. I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window, my hand trembling slightly. I'd faced death. I'd buried friends. But this was a different kind of wound, a slow, quiet burn that started deep in the chest and spread like acid. When Michael finally spoke, his tone was rehearsed, as if he had practiced it. "Dad, it was just a small thing. We'll do a proper celebration later. Don't take it personally." "Don't take it personally," I whispered. "Son, you got married without me," he sighed. "Dad, please. Emma didn't want a big scene. You know how you can be. Intense sometimes." Intense. That's what soldiers become after decades of discipline, after watching young men die. I was intense, not loving, not reliable, not a father who'd sacrificed his life for his family, just intense. That night I sat in my living room staring at the pale blue suit I'd bought for the wedding. It hung on the closet door like a ghost of a man who thought he mattered. The tag was still on it. So were the polished shoes I'd planned to wear. I'd even written a speech, a proud father's speech. It was in my notebook between old deployment photos and folded letters from my late wife, Sarah. She died 5 years ago, heart attack. She used to tell me, "Danny, you'll always have Michael. He's your legacy." She was wrong. A week passed. 7 days of silence. Then my phone rang again, Emma's name on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Daniel," she said, her tone suddenly softer, almost desperate. "The rent is due. The landlord's threatening to kick us out." You must have forgotten the transfer this month." Forgotten? No, I hadn't forgotten. I'd chosen not to. For years I'd wired them $1,200 every month. Rent, groceries, bills. They always said they'd pay me back when things got better. They never did. I'd eaten instant noodles so they could dine at restaurants. I'd skipped a vacation to pay for their car repairs. I'd said yes every single time until that morning. I took a deep breath. "Emma," I said quietly, "didn't you tell me last week that only special people get invited to your wedding?" Silence. "Daniel, please." "No," I interrupted. "I just wanted to make sure I'm not violating your new policy, because from where I stand, I'm not one of your special people." The silence stretched. I could hear her breathing, sharp, panicked. For the first time, she was the one trembling. "Daniel, I didn't mean it like that. You've always been special to us. You're like family." I laughed bitterly. "I am family, Emma. That's the problem." I hung up, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. That night, I opened my old army locker, the one with medals, photos, and discharge papers. On top of everything lay my checkbook and a folder labeled Finances. I started writing numbers. 3 years of rent, $1,200 times 36 equals $43,200. Groceries and bills, about $500 a month, $18,000. Car repairs, $3,000. Emma's emergencies, $4,800. Furniture, gifts, holidays, around $7,000. Total, $76,000. $76,000. That was the price of my foolishness. Money I'd saved from my pension and Sarah's life insurance. Money that should have gone to my peace, not their comfort. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the total. That number was more brutal than any battlefield statistic I'd seen, because every dollar was proof of how far I'd gone to buy love that was never real. The next morning, something inside me shifted. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a victim. I saw a man who'd survived worse. The eyes staring back at me weren't tired. They were steady, like they used to be when I led men into combat. I made coffee. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for Michael to call. I just sat in silence, the kind of silence soldiers crave after years of explosions. Then I made a decision. At 9 a.m., I drove to my bank. The clerk, Mr. Alvarez, had processed every one of my transfers for years. When he saw me, he smiled. "Mr. Carter, the usual transfer for your son?" "Not today," I said. "In fact, I'm here to cancel every automatic payment linked to that account." He looked surprised. "Are you sure? It's been a consistent routine for years." "Yeah," I said. "That's the problem." As he clicked through the system, my phone buzzed again. Michael, then again Emma, then again. I let them ring. Mr. Alvarez looked up concerned. "Everything okay, Major?" "For the first time in years," I said, "it is." He nodded slowly. "You know, most parents can't do what you're doing, setting boundaries. It takes guts." I smiled faintly. That's what I was trained for. When I walked out of that bank, the air felt lighter. The sky looked brighter. I wasn't sure if it was the weather or just the feeling of reclaiming my life. I'd fought many battles, but this one, I realized, was the most personal of all. When I got home, 3 cars were parked in front of my house. Michael's, Emma's, and one I didn't recognize, sleek, black, expensive. They had keys, of course. I'd given them keys years ago for emergencies. I stepped inside, and there they were. Michael sitting on the couch, head down, Emma pacing, and a man in a gray suit flipping through papers on my dining table. My papers. My papers. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. All 3 looked at me like I was the intruder. "Dad," Michael began awkwardly, "this is Mr. Hartman. He's from a law firm. We're worried about you." "Worried?" I repeated slowly. Emma stepped forward, her voice sugary sweet. "Daniel, please don't be defensive. You've been acting unstable lately, cutting us off financially, ignoring calls, changing the locks." "I haven't changed the locks yet," I said coldly. "But thanks for reminding me to." Mr. Hartman cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, your children—" "My what?" I interrupted. "My child and his wife, not my children, are concerned about your mental capacity," he continued. "They asked us to assess whether you're in a state to manage your own finances." I stared at him, stunned. "So let me get this straight. You steal my money for years, lie to me, exclude me from your wedding, and now you want to declare me mentally incompetent?" "Dad," Michael said, raising his hands like I was a suspect, "no one's declaring anything. We just think maybe you need some help. You've been paranoid." Paranoid. Another word they teach abusers when they need to gaslight their victims. "Get out," I said quietly. "Dad." "Out!" My voice thundered through the house, the same voice that once commanded soldiers on battlefields, the same authority that used to mean something. They froze. Even Mr. Hartman looked pale. Emma tried one last time. "You can't do this, Daniel. We're your family. Everything you have will be ours one day anyway. We're just trying to make things easier." There it was, the truth. I looked at them, my son, his wife, and a stranger rifling through my life, and felt something I hadn't felt since the war. Absolute clarity. Get out of my house. Emma's mask cracked. "We made plans based on your support. You can't just abandon us." "I can," I said, "and I have." Mr. Hartman slid a folder toward me. "Mr. Carter, if you sign these documents, your son can temporarily manage your accounts. It'll take the stress off you." I picked up the folder, looked at it for 2 seconds, then dropped it straight into the trash bin. "The only stress I feel," I said, "is from people who think I'm too weak to fight back." Michael's face turned red. "Dad, this is going to end badly for you. You'll regret it when you're old and alone." I stepped closer, meeting his eyes. "Son, I've been alone for years. I just didn't realize it until now." They left, slamming the door behind them. And when silence finally settled over the house, I realized, for the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of it. It was the sound of freedom. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Old habits die hard. For years, the Army had trained me to be up before dawn, ready to act while the world still slept. But that morning, it wasn't discipline that got me out of bed. It was anger, cold and steady. Not the kind of rage that burns fast and dies out, the kind that sits in your bones and demands justice. I brewed my coffee, black and strong, the way I used to before patrols. The kitchen felt different now. It wasn't filled with the echoes of phone calls, of Michael asking for help, of Emma pretending to care. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the birds outside, and my own steady breathing. I wasn't sure what my next move would be, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let them take another inch of my life. By 8, I was already on my way to see my lawyer, an old friend from the service named Walter Hughes. We'd met in Iraq back in 2004, when he was still a military prosecutor. After retirement, he opened a small firm that specialized in protecting veterans from financial abuse. When I walked into his office, he looked up from a pile of papers and gave me the same half grin I remembered from years ago. "Jesus, Carter, you look like you're about to storm a bunker." "Feels like I already did," I said, sitting down. He poured coffee into a chipped mug. "All right, tell me everything." I told him, from the secret wedding to the rent money, from the confrontation in my house to the lawyer they brought to declare me unstable. Walter didn't interrupt once. He just listened, his eyes hardening with every word. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled through his nose. "They're trying to build a case for guardianship," he said. "Classic tactic. It's called elder financial manipulation. They take advantage of your age and make you look senile so they can take control of your assets." "So what do?" I asked. "First, we document everything, every payment, every message, every time they asked you for money. We'll build a record of financial exploitation. Then we protect what's left. Change your locks, close shared accounts, move your money to a secure bank, and cut off all access." I nodded slowly. "I can handle that." He smirked. "I know you can. But you're going to need patience, too. This isn't a firefight. It's a siege." He helped me file the first set of papers, formal documentation of my financial independence and a legal notice revoking any shared access to my accounts. I signed them without hesitation. It felt like signing a declaration of freedom. When I left his office, the air outside felt sharper, clearer. I hadn't realized how heavy it was to live under their control until I started to breathe without it. I went straight to the hardware store next. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, had known me for years. He always joked that I bought more tools than I used. When he saw me walk in, he grinned. "Morning, Major. What are we fixin' today?" "My house," I said simply. "Permanently." He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. He helped me pick out a set of high-security locks, reinforced strike plates, and even suggested a modern alarm system with cameras. I agreed to everything. "You expectin' trouble?" he asked as he rang me up. "Not expecting," I said. "Preparing." He gave me a slow nod of respect. "Good. Most folks wait until it's too late." I spent the rest of the day changing every lock on my doors, installing the new deadbolts myself. My hands still remembered the steadiness of field work, the patience, the precision. When I finished, I sat on the porch with a beer staring at the sunset. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Not because I had weapons or soldiers watching my back, but because I had finally started defending my peace. The phone rang again that evening. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Daniel, it's Emma." Her voice was softer this time, trembling. "Please don't hang up." "I'm listening," I said. "We need to talk. He's upset. He didn't mean to hurt you. We just want to fix things." "By bringing a lawyer into my house—" "That was a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "We were just scared. You've been acting so distant, so cold. We thought you needed help." "I don't need help," I said calmly. "I need respect." There was silence. Then she said what I knew she would. "We're behind on rent. 2 months. The landlord is threatening to evict us. Please, Daniel, just this once." I laughed quietly. "Emma, you know what we used to call soldiers who ignored orders and kept repeating mistakes?" "What?" she asked, confused. "Dead." And I hung up. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up with a new mission: living for myself. It felt strange, almost uncomfortable, like wearing civilian clothes for the first time after years in uniform. I went to the barber shop, got a clean shave, then stopped by a cafe downtown where I hadn't been in years. I sat by the window with a black coffee and a book. No phone, no obligations, just quiet. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled at me. "You look like a man who finally took a day off from saving the world." "Something like that," I said. When I got home later that afternoon, there was a knock at my door. It wasn't Michael or Emma, it was my neighbor, Mrs. Evans, a widow who lived across the street. She carried a small plate of cookies. "I heard shouting the other day," she said gently. "Everything all right, Major?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Everything's fine now. Just family business." She studied me for a moment. "Family can be tougher than any war, can't it?" I smiled faintly. "You have no idea." She left the cookies and said, "If you ever need company, my porch is always open. I make good coffee." After she left, I sat on the couch and thought about her words. Family can be tougher than war. She was right. Because in war, you at least know who your enemy is. 2 days later, my lawyer called. "They've been to your bank," Walter said grimly. "Tried to reinstate the transfers. The bank didn't budge because you revoked authorization, but they know now that you've locked them out." "Good," I said. "Let them know it's over." "It's not over," he warned. "People like this don't give up. They'll try to make you look unstable, maybe even involve social services." "I've dealt with worse." "I'm sure you have," he said. "But remember, this is psychological warfare now. They'll try to break you emotionally." He was right. That weekend, while I was watching an old war documentary, headlights flashed outside my window. I peeked through the blinds. Michael's car. He sat there for a few minutes, then drove off. He came back the next day. Same thing. No knock, no call, just watching. On the third day, I stepped outside. He froze when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Dad, I just wanted to talk." "Then talk." He looked older than I remembered, stressed, tired. But I'd learned not to trust that look. Guilt could wear a disguise, too. "Emma's pregnant," he blurted out. "We thought maybe—" I raised my hand. "Stop right there. I'm not funding another generation of dependency." His jaw tightened. "You're unbelievable. You'd abandon your own grandchild?" "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said calmly. "I'm just refusing to be used again." He shook his head. "You're sick, Dad. You need help." "I'm the healthiest I've been in years." He got back in his car, slammed the door, and drove away. I stood there watching the taillights fade down the street, feeling both grief and relief. The son I'd raised was gone. Maybe he'd been gone a long time. That night I wrote a letter to Sarah. I still kept her photo on my nightstand, her smile, her soft eyes. I spoke out loud as I wrote, like she could hear me. "Sarah, I finally did it. I stopped being their crutch. I thought I was protecting them, but I was really just protecting my guilt. Guilt for not being around enough when I was deployed. Guilt for missing birthdays. Guilt for being a soldier instead of a father. But I can't fix that with money. Maybe now he'll learn what I learned in war. Survival means standing on your own feet." I folded the letter and slipped it under her photo. The next morning, Walter called again. "Carter, you might want to sit down for this." "What is it?" "They tried to access your records through a lawyer. Same guy who came to your house, Hartman. He filed a preliminary inquiry for potential guardianship proceedings." "So it's starting," I said quietly. "Yeah," Walter said. "But don't worry, we'll be ready." I looked out the window at the morning sun rising over my quiet street. The war I thought I'd left behind had just found me again. Only this time the battlefield was my own life, and I was done retreating. The knock came in the late morning, polite but insistent, the kind of rapping that says I have a script and a badge to back it up. I opened the door to find a woman in a navy blazer, hair pulled into an exact bun, a leather folio under her arm, and an ID held out like a shield. "Mr. Carter, I'm Melissa Shaw with Adult Protective Services. We received a report expressing concern about your well-being. May I come in for a brief wellness check?" There it was, not a surprise, just sooner than I expected. Walter had warned me, when the money dries up, the performance begins. "You can step inside," I said, "but I'm calling my attorney before we talk." "That's not necessary," she replied with measured warmth. "This is informal." "So was the last war I fought if you asked the politicians," I said, already dialing. "Please have a seat." Walter picked up on the second ring. "Talk to me." "APS is here," I said. "Agent Shaw." "I'll be there in 20, he said. "Be courteous. Answer nothing substantive until I arrive. Offer water. No hostility." "Copy." I set a bottle of water on the coffee table. Melissa took out a form, her voice modulating to the exact pitch of concern. "We've received reports of changes in your financial behavior, social isolation, installing excessive security, and refusing help from family. Sometimes those can be indicators of cognitive decline or exploitation by bad actors." "Family," I said. "Did the report name them?" "I'm not at liberty, of course," I said. "You'll find I'm very literate in liberty." She tried a different route. "Do you manage your own finances, Mr. Carter?" "I'll answer everything when my counsel arrives," I said. "Meanwhile, you're welcome to note that the house is orderly. My refrigerator is stocked, the laundry is folded, and there's a list on the fridge of every bill paid this month with confirmation numbers." Her eyes flicked to the kitchen. Details matter, they always have. Walter arrived like a storm buttoned into a suit. He checked the badge, shook her hand, and took the seat nearest me, angled slightly, a subtle cue that he and I were a unit. "Ms. Shaw, thank you for the visit. My client is happy to cooperate. I'll sit in." She nodded and began again, gentler. "Mr. Carter, any reason you abruptly stopped financial transfers to your son?" I met her eyes. "Yes. Because I realized I wasn't funding emergencies, I was funding avoidance of adulthood." Walter slid a folder across the table. Timeline of transfers for 3 years with text records of requests and Mr. Carter's notes.
You'll find recurring monthly payments for rent and utilities, plus ad hoc sums for car repairs, medical emergencies lacking documentation, and discretionary purchases. Mr. Carter terminated those transfers after being excluded from his son's wedding and subsequently subjected to efforts to obtain power of attorney in his own living room. Melissa scanned the first page. Her poker face twitched very slightly at the photo of the lawyer in my dining room and Emma's text about special people. "Mr. Carter," she said, "do you take any medications?" "Daily multivitamin, occasional ibuprofen," I said. "Records from Riverside Pharmacy will show no regular psychiatric or memory medications." Walter added, "We've already requested a letter from the pharmacist clarifying a previous misunderstanding. We'll provide it today." "Any medical diagnoses impacting cognition?" "No," I said, "unless stubbornness counts." "Do you feel unsafe?" I thought about it. "I feel prepared." She finished her checklist, then closed the folio. "From what I've seen and reviewed, I have no immediate concerns about your ability to care for yourself. I will note the family conflict and the abrupt financial change, but I don't see grounds for further intervention at this time." "Thank you," Walter said. "If you need anything else, contact me directly." She stood. "One more thing, Mr. Carter. In my experience, boundary setting with adult children is hardest in the first months. People escalate to regain control. If you need referrals for support groups, I can provide them." I nodded. "Appreciate that." When the door clicked shut, Walter exhaled. "They're testing your perimeter," he said. expect more. I already changed the locks, I said. I'll add cameras. Do it, and document everything. The security installer, a lean kid named Bryce, with sleeve tattoos that looked like topographic maps, showed up the next morning. Exterior cams, 2 interior, doorbell, motion alerts to your phone, he said. Cell backup in case they cut the power. Want glass break sensors? Put them in, I said, and add a second keypad in the master. Code 6 digits. He grinned. You've done this before. Different sandbox. By noon, my house had eyes. The doorbell chimed with a new confidence. I poured coffee, sat at the table, and started another list. On deployment, lists had kept me alive. Patrol schedule, equipment checks, comm windows. Now the list was civilian but no less tactical. Bank, new account at a new institution, done. Locks, replaced, done. Security, cameras, sensors, done. Pharmacist letter, pending. Witness statements, neighbor Mrs. Evans, barber, cafe owner, people who see me functioning. Psychiatric capacity eval by neutral doctor, schedule, restraining order draft if they show up again, update will. VA benefits advisor, check if any resources exist for elder financial abuse among vets. I circled number 6. In this kind of fight, you don't wait for the other side to define you, you define yourself first. Walter recommended a neuropsychologist he trusted. Dr. Asha Patel, he said, fair, thorough, unimpeachable in court. I called and booked the soonest slot. 2 hours of interview and testing, the receptionist warned. Bring a list of medications, emergency contacts, and any concerns. Only concern, I said, is people confusing boundaries with illness. On the way home, I stopped at Riverside Pharmacy. Mr. Green looked like he'd lost a week's sleep. Mr. Carter, he blurted before I even reached the counter. I'm so sorry. Your daughter-in-law said it was for insurance. I didn't know they'd use my words like that. Here. He slid a printed letter across. Statement clarifying that you have no prescriptions indicating cognitive impairment, that your purchases are consistent and appropriate, and that any prior implication was based on misleading requests by a third party. I notarized it. Thank you, I said. Happens to the best of us. Manipulators are professionals, he winced. If they come back, I'll call you, or the police. Call my lawyer, I said, and tucked the letter into my folder. That evening, the doorbell cam pinged. Michael's car passed slow, stopped, backed up, parked across the street. He didn't get out, just stared at the house through the windshield. A hunter remembering where the fence line used to be. I stood behind the curtain and watched him watch me. A minute later, he drove off. The app logged time and date. Civilian OSINT. Dr. Patel's office didn't smell like antiseptic. It smelled like tea and paper. She was in her 50s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense posture softened by a cardigan that said, I recognize the human in front of me. Mr. Carter, she said, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. If anything feels disrespectful, tell me. My job is to assess, not to judge. I've been judged by better, I said. You'll be fine, she smiled. We started. Orientation questions, memory recall, word lists, problem solving, abstract reasoning. She slid patterns across the table and asked me to complete them, read a paragraph and requested a summary, gave me numbers to repeat backward. Then the real questions. Tell me why you stopped financially supporting your son. Because supporting became subsidizing became surrendering, I said. The line moved and I didn't notice until it disappeared. Any major changes to your routine? I started living for myself again. Any new friends? Neighbors, the barber, the kid who installed my security system, people who like me for conversation, not for transfers. She made notes. Any hallucinations, voices, paranoia? I've had flashbacks, I said, not ashamed of that. But I know where I am and what year it is. I also know that locking your door isn't paranoia, it's adulthood. After 2 hours, she set her pen down. "Mr. Carter, your cognitive scores are excellent for your age, above average across memory, executive function, and reasoning.
You are not only competent, you're astute. I'll draft a formal report within 48 hours. Appreciate it, I said. I assume it'll be needed. People who call APS on competent elders rarely stop at a wellness check, she said gently. You're doing the right things. Keep a paper trail. On the way home, I swung by the VA office. The lobby was full of familiar silhouettes, old shoulders squared by habit, canes positioned like rifles grounded at attention. A counselor named Morales shook my hand with grip and respect. "What can we do, Major?" "Education," I said, "for me and for others. Elder financial abuse, especially by family. Resources, support groups." He nodded, slid me a packet. "Happening every day. We see a lot of veterans who raised kids in the shadow of duty. Guilt gets expensive. We run a monthly group down the hall, meets Thursdays. You want in?" "I'll be there," I said. At the back of the packet was a checklist that read like my kitchen list. Change direct deposits, revoke powers of attorney, establish trusted contacts outside family, document threats, routine capacity screenings. I felt oddly comforted. Battle drills for home. The next escalation came on a Wednesday, sunshine bright and ordinary. Doorbell cam, Emma at my porch with a pie box and a look she must have practiced in the mirror. Chastened, tender, maybe a touch of saintly suffering. I didn't open the door. The two-way speaker crackled. "Daniel," she said, staring into the camera like it was my eyes. "I brought you cherry pie. You always liked cherry." "No," I said. "Can we talk? Just 5 minutes?" "This is me talking," I said, "through a system that records." She swallowed. "I'm sorry for how things went with the wedding." "You aren't," I said. "You're sorry the payments stopped." "We're family." "You made other selections when you curated your guest list." Color rose in her cheeks, quick as a flare. "You think this makes you strong. It makes you cruel." "Strength isn't cruelty," I said. "It's clarity." She set the pie on the step like an offering at a shrine and walked back to her car. The doorbell recorded everything. 30 minutes later, a stray cat claimed the pie. I let it. Walter called that afternoon. "We got Dr. Patel's preliminary. It's gold. APS closed their file with no action. The pharmacist letter landed. Good. Now the bad news." "Hit me," I said. Hartman filed a petition for temporary guardianship pending a full competency hearing. Court set a status conference for 3 weeks from Friday. They're alleging erratic behavior, susceptibility to undue influence, and neglecting medical care. Do we know their witnesses? Emma, obviously. A neighbor, last name Davis, who claims you've been yelling in the street and installing a paranoid surveillance grid. And a primary care note they claim implies non-compliance, though I suspect it's either misread or fabricated. We'll pull your actual medical records. Also, they submitted screenshots of texts that, taken out of context, make you sound confused. "I don't text confused," I said. "They may have edited timestamps or cropped threads. We'll counter with full exports from your phone and an affidavit from your provider about patient portal messages you've sent, which are coherent and timely." "What do you need from me now?" "Witnesses of functionality," he said. "People who can testify you shop, pay bills, drive safely, volunteer, hold conversations that make sense. Receipts, logs. And I want you to sign a declaration in your own words. Judges read those." "Copy," I said. "I'll build the packet." The next 48 hours I ran logistics like a supply chief. Bank manager letter confirming I personally initiated the stop on transfers and asked about fraud protections. Mrs. Evans wrote a statement about our porch conversations and how I'd helped her carry mulch bags last weekend.
The cafe owner printed my receipts and signed that I'd come in weekly, paid with card, read a book, discussed baseball scores and local politics without veering into word salad. Bryce, the installer, wrote a line about my questions being precise, thorough, and better than most homeowners. The barber added that I'd been tipping the same amount for years and remembered his kid's name. It sounds small until you've sat in court. The mundane is a map of a mind working. At night, I still wrote to Sarah, not because I needed to, but because it turned the noise down. I used to think loving Michael meant shielding him from the hard edge of life, I wrote. But all I did was sharpen that edge against myself. You were the soft place in this house. When you died, I tried to be both shield and sword. Turns out I'm just a man, and men break when they're used as furniture. 2 days before the status conference, the doorbell pinged at 10:37 p.m. Motion. My phone showed 2 figures cutting across the yard to the side gate. The night vision washed them in gray. One was Michael. The other? A friend of his, broad shoulders, ball cap, that swagger of someone who thinks cameras are for other people. They rattled the gate. The deadbolt held. The system chirped. An alert went to the monitoring center and to the police. I turned on the porch floodlights with a thumb press. They flinched like deer, then jogged back to the car, tires chirping as they fled. 10 minutes later, a patrol cruiser rolled by, lights off, slow and patient like a hunter that knew the woods better than the deer. I filed the clip, emailed it to Walter. Subject line, attempted entry. He called the next morning. We're adding the video to our packet and filing for a temporary restraining order today. That conduct looks very bad to a judge on a guardianship petition. I don't want my son in jail, I said, surprising myself with the softness in my voice. We're not sending him to jail. We're establishing a boundary with teeth, Walter said. You're not the one choosing consequences, he is. The status conference was bureaucratic foreplay in a fluorescent courtroom. Calendars, continuances, hushed sidebars. Hartman wore a tie the exact shade of arrogance. Emma had swapped the contrition for bone-white resolve. Michael kept checking his phone like a teenager. Counsel, the judge said. Martinez, mid-60s, eyes tired but not dull. What's the emergency? Hartman rose. Your Honor, we have serious concerns about Mr. Carter's capacity. He has abruptly severed ties with his only family, installed a paranoid surveillance system, and is under undue influence by neighbors and an attorney who stands to benefit from litigation fees. We request temporary guardianship so bills can be paid and medical decisions can be made. Walter stood. Your Honor, opposing counsel just described autonomy as pathology. We have a recent neuropsych evaluation demonstrating excellent cognitive function, a closed APS case with no action, letters from medical and financial professionals affirming independence, and, he lifted a tablet, video of the petitioners attempting to enter my client's property after dark. If anyone requires oversight here, it's not Mr. Carter. Martinez rubbed his temple with 2 fingers. I'll set an evidentiary hearing for a full record. In the meantime, no temporary guardianship. Both sides will exchange exhibits and witness lists in 10 days. Mr. Carter, do you understand your rights and the nature of these proceedings? I rose. Yes, Your Honor. Do you want a court-appointed attorney separate from Mr. Hughes? I do not, I said. I chose him. And do you feel you need any assistance managing your day-to-day affairs? I do not, I said. I've been managing other people's day-to-day for too long as it is. A hint of smile, quick as a heartbeat, touched the corner of his mouth. "Very well. We'll reconvene in 3 weeks." Outside the courtroom, Emma caught my arm. Her fingers were cool. "You're going to lose," she said quietly, smile not touching her eyes. "Not because you're incompetent, but because you're alone." I looked at her hand until she let go. I spent 22 years standing with men who were only there because the man next to them stood. Alone is a story people tell themselves to explain why they quit. Michael stepped in. "This is your last chance, Dad. Sign power of attorney over to me, and we end this without humiliating you." "Son," I said, "every humiliation I've felt in this saga you already gave me. The courthouse can't add a thing." He flinched. Hartman herded them away. On the drive home, Walter drummed the steering wheel. "We need to firm up witnesses, lock your medical records, and memorialize every routine you keep. Judges like habits. They imply stability." "Copy," I said. "I'll over-prepare." "You always did," he said, and the hint of a grin broke through the war lines on his face. That night, the neighborhood adjusted around me. Mrs. Evans left a loaf of bread on my porch. Bryce texted to say he'd add a second camera angle on the side gate for free. The cafe owner told me the Thursday group had an extra chair with my name on it and a stale joke about army coffee. Small things, but they accumulate like sandbags around a house before a flood. I slept with the window cracked, listening to the summer crickets and the low electric hum of a street that had no idea I was preparing for a battle invisible to most. In the dark, I told Sarah the truth I hadn't told anyone else. I'm not angry because they asked. I'm angry because I taught them to ask without cost, I whispered. But this cost is mine to impose, and I will. 2 days later, Dr. Patel's formal report landed in my inbox. 11 pages of method, scores, and a crisp conclusion. Mr. Carter demonstrates intact and above-average cognitive function across domains. No evidence of dementia, mild cognitive impairment, or major psychiatric disorder. Capable of independent decision-making regarding finances, medical care, and personal safety. Walter filed it that afternoon with our exhibits list. Bank letter, pharmacist letter, APS closure note, neighbor statements, cafe receipts, barber note, installer affidavit, video clip, my declaration. He sent me a copy of everything. I printed it, slid it into a binder with dividers labeled like operations, finance, medical, community, security, incidents, legal. I'd never thought I'd make an op order on my own life in suburbia. But here I was, and damned if it didn't feel right. The day before our evidentiary hearing notice arrived by mail, the doorbell chimed a midday delivery. A plain envelope, hand-carried by a process server. "From Mr. Daniel Carter," he said. "You've been served." He was almost apologetic. Inside, their witness declarations. Emma's statement painted me as paranoid and cruel. Michael's said I'd become hyper-fixated on security and was under the sway of a predatory attorney and gossiping neighbors. A man named Davis described me as aggressive for asking him not to block my driveway. And a physician letter attached, thin, vague, claimed possible cognitive decline, based on no examination and a family report. I took a breath, slow and deep. Then I walked to the kitchen, opened my binder, and wrote the next line on my list. 10. Fight like hell, but don't lose yourself. I set the pen down and looked out at the yard. The late light painted the grass the color of deployment sunsets, that aching, impossible orange. I didn't miss the war, but I remembered what it demanded: clarity, courage, commitment when the outcome isn't guaranteed. They wanted to put me under a guardianship. They wanted my house, my pension, the freedom Sarah and I had built and I had guarded. They wanted the lever, the one that moves a man's life without his consent. They weren't going to get it. I poured coffee, black and simple, and sat down to rehearse my testimony aloud. Not lines to memorize, truth to inhabit. A soldier's body learns drills until they become instinct. This would be no different. I would tell the judge what happened. I would show him who I am. And when they tried to turn my discipline into disease, my boundaries into symptoms, I'd meet it the only way I know. Head on. Eyes open. Standing. The courthouse smelled like waxed floors and cautious hope. I arrived in a suit that still sat right on my shoulders, spine straight out of habit, notes folded once and slid into the inside pocket like a field map. Walter walked beside me, calm as a man who'd learned to breathe under fire. We didn't rehearse pleasantries. We went over our lanes. He'd lead on law, I'd lead on truth. Truth has weight when spoken without apology. Judge Martinez took the bench with the air of someone who'd seen every family story twice already. His gaze touched each table, weighing us the way commanders weigh men before a mission. "We're here on a petition for guardianship," he said. "The burden is on the petitioners. Counsel, proceed." Hartman rose, voice smooth as varnish. He talked of love and concern, of rapid personality change, of susceptibility to undue influence, of a veteran isolating under the guidance of predatory neighbors and an overzealous attorney. He said my new cameras were signs of paranoia, my canceled transfers signs of cognitive decline, my refusal to fund my son's rent proof that I'd lost empathy. He said the word vulnerable like a verdict. Walter didn't move. He let the paint dry on Hartman's canvas. Then he stood. "Your Honor, opposing counsel just criminalized boundaries and pathologized independence. We will show this court a competent, disciplined adult who finally ended years of financial exploitation. We will also show deceit, evidence massaged, context stripped, a pharmacy letter obtained under false pretenses, and late-night trespass designed to intimidate. This petition is not about care. It's about control." They called Emma first. She took the stand in a dress that whispered humility. The oath sounded good on her tongue. Hartman led gently. "Tell the court about Mr. Carter's changes." "He's become cold," she said, eyes glassing perfectly. "He used to call, ask how we were, send money when we were behind. Then he cut us off with no warning. He installed all these cameras, stopped trusting us, started seeing a lawyer. He wouldn't even accept a pie, Your Honor." She let the smallest tremor into her voice. "He's not the man he was." "Did you exclude him from your wedding?" Hartman asked gently. "It was a small ceremony. We wanted peace. He can be intense." The words slid out like a well-oiled catchphrase. Walter stepped up for cross, hands light on the lectern. "Mrs. Carter, when was the last time you called my client without requesting money?" She blinked. "We talked about many things." "Give me one date." "I don't keep a ledger of calls." "We do," Walter said, holding up a phone log. "The last 23 calls from you began with, within 60 seconds, a financial request. True?" "I don't recall the exact content." Is this your text? Walter read. Rent late, landlord says Friday or we're out. Can you do 1,200? We'll pay you back next month. Promise. He scrolled. Again the next month. Again and again. Do those refresh your recollection? She recovered quickly. Families help each other. Did you tell Mr. Carter, when he asked about the wedding date, we only invited special people? Her smile thinned. Those words were taken out of context. What context justifies telling a father who paid your rent for years that he isn't special enough to attend his son's wedding? She glanced at Hartman.
We were overwhelmed. Walter looked down at his notes, then up at the judge. No further questions. Michael took the stand with a tie he wasn't born to wear and a jaw locked against consequence. Hartman's direct started with boyhood and grief, my deployments and his birthdays. It was a careful lattice of true facts and false conclusions. He used to be present, Michael said, but lately he's gotten obsessive. He changed the locks like we're criminals. He called the police on us. He's under that lawyer's spell. Walter's cross was anatomy, precise, clinical. Mr. Carter, how much money did you receive from your father in the last 3 years? I don't know. Would 76,000 sound accurate? Rent, groceries, car repairs, furniture, plus ad hoc transfers. We have bank records. Michael stared at the witness table, then said, he offered. Did you break into his home with a lawyer to pressure him to sign power of attorney? We went there because we were worried. Did you bring a lawyer? He swallowed. Yes. Did you attempt to enter his yard after dark and rattle the side gate 2 nights before the status conference? Michael blinked. No. Walter tapped his tablet. The courtroom monitors flickered to doorbell footage. Night vision. 2 men at my gate. Michael's profile sharp as a confession. The metal clattered, the floodlights exploded, and the men ran. The clip ended on a timestamp and a police dispatch record. Walter let the silence work. Is that you? Michael's face flushed. I wasn't trying to break in. You were trying to scare him. We were trying to talk. Through a locked gate at 10:37 p.m., Walter said, voice flat. No further questions. Hartman called their neighbor, Mr. Davis. He described me as angry and paranoid, a man who yells in the street and watches everyone with cameras. He took offense at the notion a driveway is not community property. Walter's cross took 30 seconds. Mr. Davis, have you ever had a conversation with my client beyond, don't block my driveway? No? So your clinical diagnosis comes from observing a man protect his property. Thank you. Nothing further. Then came a physician letter, thin as varnish, signed by a doctor I'd seen once for stitches. It said, possible cognitive decline, based on family report. Walter objected to foundation. Sustained. Hartman sat down with his confidence intact, but his momentum dented. Our turn. Dr. Patel testified first. She laid out her credentials, testing methods, scores. She explained executive function, working memory, abstraction, and why my performance sat above the mean for my age. There is no evidence of dementia, mild cognitive impairment, or major psychiatric disorder, she said. Mr. Carter is decisively capable of independent decision-making regarding finances, medical care, and personal safety. Hartman tried to chip. Doctor, could a person test well and still be vulnerable to undue influence? Any human can be manipulated, she said. But we look for patterns, confusion, inconsistency, impaired insight. Mr. Carter shows none. In fact, his boundary setting is healthy after prolonged enmeshment. Mr. Green, the pharmacist, followed, nervous, honest. He admitted Emma had solicited a statement under the guise of insurance, and he had signed without understanding it'd be used in court. He read his corrected letter into the record.
I had no prescriptions indicating cognitive impairment, that my purchases were consistent, and any prior implication was based on misleading requests by a third party. Hartman objected to hearsay. The judge overruled. Foundation was laid. Credibility was the court's to weigh. Mrs. Evans described our porch talks, my help hauling mulch, my habit of checking on her after storms, and the Thursday veterans group I'd joined. The cafe owner testified about our baseball debates and my exact change problem-solving when the register was down.
Bryce, the installer, spoke to my questions. He wanted cell backup, glass break sensors, change default codes, and asked me to show him how to update firmware. Paranoid people don't care about firmware, sir. Prepared people do. The courtroom chuckled. Even Martinez's eyes lit briefly. Walter saved me for last. I took the stand, oath steady on my tongue. "Major Carter," Walter said, "why did you cut off the money?" Because I was no longer funding emergencies. I was funding avoidance. I taught my son that he could miss the target and I'd move it closer. That's not love, that's slow ruin. What changed for you? A sentence, I said. We only invited special people. I have crawled out of ditches and watched good men die with my name in their mouths. I thought I knew pain. But hearing that I wasn't special enough to watch my son take vows, that recalibrated everything. I looked at my ledger, and I saw it wasn't generosity anymore. It was penance. I was paying for birthdays I missed, for scars he didn't give me permission to carry, and he took my penance as permission to keep taking. So I stopped. Walter nodded once. Opposing counsel calls that paranoia. What do you call the cameras, the locks, the binder, the lawyer? I call it a perimeter, I said. In war, a perimeter is not fear, it's respect for threats. In peacetime, a perimeter is not hostility, it's self-respect. I am 72. I can cook, clean, drive, pay bills, argue baseball stats, update firmware, and sit in a room without shaking when my son calls me sick. I'm not sick. I'm done. Hartman approached for cross with the false sympathy of a man who never stood a post. Mr. Carter, you mentioned missing birthdays. Do you feel guilt? Of course. Do you think that guilt could be clouding your judgment? Until recently, it was my judgment, I said. Now my judgment is mine. Isn't it true you called the police on your own son? I called the police on 2 men rattling my gate after dark. Isn't it true you refused to help your pregnant daughter-in-law? I refused to help 2 adults extort me with biology. You won't even accept a pie. With all due respect, counselor, I used to accept rent requests baked in sugar. He tried one last angle. You've replaced family with strangers, neighbors, a barista, a technician. Isn't that isolation dressed as community? My wife died, I said, and the room quieted. The hole she left is my geography. I filled it with duty for a while, then with money. Now I fill it with coffee, with helping a widow carry mulch, with a group of veterans who know that some nights you sleep with your boots by the door because it makes the dreams shorter. That's not isolation. That's a platoon. No further questions, he said, maybe because there weren't any left to ask that wouldn't boomerang. Walter closed with a sentence that sounded like the last line of an op order. Autonomy is not abuse, and boundaries are not disease. Deny the petition. Judge Martinez recessed. The minute hand crawled like an exhausted animal. When he returned, he read slowly, each phrase landing with the authority of a stamp. Having reviewed the testimony, exhibits, and professional evaluations, this court finds Mr. Carter is fully competent to manage his personal, medical, and financial affairs.
The petitioners have failed to meet their burden. The petition for guardianship is denied." He paused, eyes on Michael, then on Emma. "Further, the court is troubled by evidence of attempted manipulation, including a misleading pharmacy statement and a late-night attempt to access Mr. Carter's property. Mr. Carter is entitled to set boundaries. The court expects those boundaries to be respected."
"Any continued harassment may result in a restraining order." Walter touched my elbow beneath the table, a gesture that said, "Stand easy." My hands, which have shaken before, did not shake now. Hartman's face collapsed into careful neutrality. Emma stared through me at her future recalculating. Michael looked small in a way I'd never let myself see. Outside, the sunlight felt honest. Walter shook my hand. "You held the line," he said. "I only said what was true," I replied. "That's harder than it sounds," he said. A few steps down the courthouse steps, Emma intercepted me. Her voice had no tremor now. "You won a battle," she said, "not the war." "I'm not at war with you," I said. "That's part of the problem. You're at war with the fact I get to be a person." Michael stood a pace behind her, eyes searching for the boy he used to be. I almost reached for him, almost. Then I remembered perimeters aren't walls, they're agreements. You can open a gate someday, but you don't tear down the fence to make other people feel better about walking wherever they like. Walter and I walked to the car. I looked back once, not at them, but at the building. Courts aren't cathedrals. They're warehouses for hurt where someone tries to stack it in a way that doesn't crush the people walking past. Today, that was enough. When I got home, the binder went back on the shelf, not as a weapon but as a record. I brewed coffee and carried a mug across the street. Mrs. Evans sat on her porch with her knitting and a look that said, "Well?" "Judge told them no," I said. She nodded like she'd already known. "I baked banana bread," she said, sliding the plate toward me. "No subtext." We sat without talking, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions it doesn't need answered. For a long moment I let my shoulders drop the way they do when the perimeter is secure, the way they did when my platoon made it back to the wire and we counted one by one present. I went home before dusk, turned off the yard lights, and stood in the doorway looking at the room Sarah and I had filled with our ordinary, heroic life. I told her in a whisper only the house could hear, "We're still here." Far down the block, a car idled and then drove on. The cameras saw it. I didn't need to. I poured another cup, black as the sky just before it decides to be night, and wrote a new list on the back of an old one. Live. Leave the doorbell where it is. Water the tomatoes. Thursday group at the VA. Call the cafe about that job board for volunteer drivers. Write a letter you won't send. I set the pen down. The list felt right. It wasn't a battle plan. It was a life plan. And for the first time in too many years, I wanted the days it would take to carry it out. The weeks after the hearing passed quietly, almost suspiciously so. No calls, no late-night headlights idling at the curb. Silence, the kind that used to feel like waiting for artillery, began to sound like peace again. I kept expecting another strike, a letter, a knock, some bureaucratic echo of their last attempt. But nothing came. Maybe even they understood when a battle's lost. I used the first free morning to drive out to the coast. It's 2 hours of flat road, the kind that lets thoughts line up instead of chase each other. I hadn't seen the ocean in 10 years. When I stepped out of the truck and smelled salt and diesel, it hit me how long I'd been breathing recycled air. First base housing, then obligation. I walked down to the pier, hands in my jacket pockets, wind cutting through the noise that wasn't there anymore. An old fisherman squinted at me.
"You served," he said. "Guilty," I answered. He nodded like that explained everything that needed explaining. "The water's the only thing that doesn't care who you were." He was right. I stayed until the horizon went red, then drove home with a calm that wasn't earned on any battlefield. Back in town, the Thursday Veterans Group had become a fixture in my week. We met in a bland conference room that smelled of burnt coffee and purpose. Men and women with different wars, but the same ghosts. We didn't talk about firefights much. We talked about bills, grandkids, sleep. The first time I told them about Michael and the guardianship, there was a collective grunt of recognition. "You're not the first," Morales said. "Half this room has family trying to manage their pension for their own good." One of the younger vets, a woman from Afghanistan, leaned forward. "So what now, Major? You just move on?" "Moving on's a civilian phrase," I said. "We adapt." They laughed, but it stuck. Adapting became the group's word for everything: therapy, gardening, dating again. Adapt. Don't retreat. I started volunteering through the VA, driving older vets to appointments. The first guy I picked up was 84, a Korean War radio man. He wore a tie for his neurology checkup and apologized for being slow. On the way back, he said, "My daughter doesn't talk to me. Says I'm stubborn." "Stubborn keeps the lights on," I told him. He chuckled. "You sound like my CO." I dropped him at his house and sat in the truck a while, thinking how easily a life can narrow until all that's left is the drive to the next appointment. I didn't want that to be me, and maybe helping others avoid it was part of the deal. At home, I built new routines. Morning run, coffee, check the cameras, feed the stray cat that had adopted my porch after the pie incident. I named him Bravo. He came and went like soldiers on leave, grateful, hungry, self-contained. I also went through Sarah's boxes. For years, I couldn't. Her letters smelled faintly of lavender still. In one she'd written, "You have to promise to live after me, not just survive." I'd broken that promise quietly for 5 years. Now I could keep it. I sold a few pieces of furniture, donated the old couch Michael used to crash on. The house felt lighter. I painted the spare room and turned it into a studio. The first thing I hung was the framed court order denying guardianship, not out of spite, out of proof. It was the last battle report I'd ever need. One afternoon, Mrs. Evans brought over a flyer. "Town Library's doing a community talk series," she said. "They want speakers with stories." I laughed. "Mine's not exactly bedtime material." They didn't say it had to be pretty. So I called. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of 25 strangers in a room that smelled of old paper and air conditioning. I told them about financial abuse, about guilt disguised as love, about how discipline and kindness aren't opposites. I expected polite nods. What I got were raised hands, people asking how to protect their parents or themselves. When it ended, a man my age clasped my hand. "You gave me language," he said. That mattered more than the applause. Word spread faster than I expected. The local paper ran a piece. "Retired soldier wins fight for independence." They printed a photo of me on the porch with Bravo pretending to be fierce. I didn't like seeing my face in print, but if one person saw it and recognized their own story, it was worth it. A month later, a letter arrived with no return address. The handwriting was Michael's. I stared at it a long time before opening it. "Dad," it began, "you were right. We went too far. I don't know how to fix it. Emma's gone back to her parents. I'm working nights at the warehouse. I'm not asking for money. I just wanted to say I'm sorry.
It ended there. No love, Mike. No address. Just an apology, folded twice. I read it 3 times, then set it under Sarah's photo. I didn't feel triumph, just a deep, tired compassion. Sometimes victories are quiet, so they don't scare forgiveness away. I didn't write back. Not yet. Some things need time, more than words. That evening I sat on the porch with Mrs. Evans. The air smelled of rain and cut grass.
"You heard from them," she said softly. I nodded. "He's breathing on his own. That's a start." "You think you'll see him again?"
"Maybe, when he stops seeing me as a wallet with a pulse." She smiled sadly. "You've still got a lot of fight in you, Daniel." Fight's just another word for wanting something to live. The next day I drove out to the veterans' cemetery where Sarah's stone waited under a pine tree. The grass was bright from last night's rain. I cleaned the marker, replaced the flowers, and stood there until my knees ached. "Sarah," I said quietly, "I think we did all right. He's stumbling, but he's learning. And me, I'm still here." The wind picked up and moved through the pines with that low, steady sound she used to love. Driving home, I realized the house didn't feel like a bunker anymore. The locks, the cameras, they were tools, not armor. The real defense was clarity. Walter called a week later. "The court clerk sent the certified dismissal. Case is closed for good. You can frame it or burn it." "I'll file it next to the discharge papers," I said. "Same category. Fought, finished, survived." He paused. "You know, Carter, not everyone walks out of this hole. You did." "I had training," I said. He laughed. "Not for this kind of war." "Same principles apply," I said. "Know your enemy, hold your ground, protect your people, even if the only person left is you." In September, the VA group asked me to help run a workshop on financial resilience for veterans. I said yes. The first session, a man in the back raised his hand. "What do you do when it's your own kid trying to take everything?" The room went silent, waiting for me. "You remember who taught him right from wrong," I said. "And you act like that person still exists inside you, because if you forget your own standard, you've already surrendered." After the meeting, Morales clapped my shoulder. "You're good at this. Ever think of mentoring officially?" "I think I just did," I said. That night I sat on the porch with Bravo on my lap, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. Somewhere a kid laughed, the sound rolling down the block like a memory from a gentler war. I thought about all the years I'd spent defining myself by what I protected. Maybe now I could be defined by what I built. I went inside, poured a single shot of bourbon, and looked at the wall where the binder used to sit. In its place I'd hung a photograph of the ocean at sunset, the one from that first drive to the coast. Below it, I'd written a line on a scrap of paper and taped it to the frame. "Freedom is not the absence of duty. It's the right to choose which duty is yours." The phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I let it ring out, then deleted the voicemail without listening. If it was Michael, he'd call again when he had something real to say. Before bed, I checked the perimeter one last time. Cameras steady, doors locked, house breathing easy. I turned off the lights and caught my reflection in the window. The face was older, lines deeper, but the eyes were steady. Not the stare of a man waiting for battle, but of one who'd finally stood down. "Mission complete," I said quietly. And the house, or maybe Sarah, or maybe just the night, seemed to answer back with silence that felt like peace.
Outside, Bravo jumped from the porch rail into the dark, chasing something only he could see. I watched him disappear, smiled, and shut the door. Tomorrow would come, and for once, I wanted it to. Morning came slow and soft, the kind that doesn't demand anything from you. The light slipped through the blinds like it was testing permission to enter. For the first time in a decade, I didn't wake to an alarm or to a sense of unfinished duty. I woke because I wanted to. I brewed coffee and stepped outside barefoot, feeling the cool porch wood under my feet. The street was quiet except for a jogger and the mail truck humming 2 blocks down. Ordinary sounds, the kind you only notice when your life stops being a battlefield. I checked the garden I'd started 2 months ago. Tomatoes climbing higher, basil thick, a line of sunflowers along the fence that Mrs. Evans insisted would make the house look alive. They did. Every morning they turned toward the light, stubborn and steady. I'd been the opposite for years, always turned toward someone else's need, someone else's storm. Now I understood what it meant to stand still and let the light find you. A small package sat by the door, no return address. Inside was a folded piece of paper and an old photograph. The paper read, "For Dad. Thought you'd want this back." The photo was of Michael at 16, standing next to me at the rifle range. I remembered that day, the smell of oil, his nervous grin, the way he asked if he'd ever be as steady as me. On the back of the photo he'd written, "I'm trying." I sat down on the steps and just looked at it for a while. Forgiveness isn't a ceremony, it's a muscle. You stretch it a little, and maybe someday it doesn't hurt to use. That afternoon I went to the VA center to speak with Morales. "He's reaching out," I said, showing him the photo. Morales smiled. "Looks like he's finally seen the horizon. Doesn't mean you have to sail toward it yet." "I know, but maybe I can stop treating it like enemy waters." He nodded. "That's healing, Major, not weakness." On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store. It sounds trivial, but it hit me that I hadn't bought food for anyone but myself in years. I lingered by the bakery, looking at pies, cherry, apple, pecan. I picked one up, then laughed quietly and set it back. Not yet. At home, the answering machine blinked. One message, Michael's voice, hesitant. "Hey, Dad, I wanted to thank you for not pressing charges about the gate. I didn't know what I was doing then. Anyway, I hope you're all right. Maybe one day we can talk. No lawyers, no money, just talk." I didn't replay it. I didn't delete it either. I left it there, an open door in a locked house. Days fell into rhythm, mornings in the garden, afternoons volunteering, evenings reading or walking to Mrs. Evans's porch. She'd become family in the way that blood sometimes fails to be, steady, curious, kind without strings. One evening, as the sun sank orange behind the roofs, she asked, "Do you ever think about moving closer to your son?" I shook my head. "I think about giving him space to find his own footing. That's closer than we've ever been." "You're a good man, Daniel." "Good's relative," I said, "but I'm finally a free one." The Veterans Group decided to host a community event for Memorial Day, a mix of barbecue, live music, and a small ceremony for those who didn't make it home. Morales asked me to speak. When the day came, the park was full. Kids ran between folding chairs, the grill smoke rose like a flag, and old songs drifted from the speakers. I stood on the makeshift stage in jeans and a faded unit shirt, looking at the faces, men and women who'd carried invisible weight for years. I didn't bring notes, I just spoke. I spent my life thinking duty ended when the uniform came off. I was wrong. Duty doesn't leave, it changes shape. Sometimes it's protecting your family. Sometimes it's protecting yourself from them. It took me too long to learn that love without respect is just dependence with better lighting. But here's the thing, there's no rank in forgiveness. You just decide to stop fighting ghosts. The crowd was silent. Not the silence of politeness, of recognition. Then someone started clapping, and it rolled through the field until it became thunder. Afterward, a woman came up to me, maybe my age, maybe older. "My daughter did the same thing," she said quietly. "Tried to take everything after my husband died. I thought I was crazy. Listening to you, I don't feel crazy anymore." "You're not," I told her.
You're just waking up.
That night, when the house settled into its familiar quiet, I went out to the porch with a fresh notebook. On the first page I wrote, "Operation Phoenix. Rebuilding after the fire." Not a memoir, not yet, just lessons. The kind of handbook I wish someone had handed me before I mistook sacrifice for love. I wrote about boundaries, about the dignity of saying no, about how silence can be the loudest defense, about how survival after betrayal isn't revenge, it's reclamation. Somewhere around midnight, I stopped writing and listened to the night. Crickets, distant laughter from a backyard party down the block, and my own heartbeat, slow and steady, like marching boots fading down a safe road. A month later, I got a postcard, postmarked from another state. A short note. "Found work at a mechanic shop. It's honest. Hope you're doing well. M." No apology this time. No pleading. Just information. Proof of life. That was enough. I placed it next to Sarah's letterbox. She'd have liked that. By late summer, I'd built a small circle. Neighbors, vets, a few folks from the library talks. We met once a week at the cafe. We called it the Perimeter Club. Half joke, half mission. Anyone could come. Anyone could talk. No rank, no judgment. Just people learning how to guard their peace without building walls too high. One of the regulars, a nurse named Linda, asked me once, "Do you ever get lonely?" "Sometimes," I said. "But loneliness isn't always an enemy. Sometimes it's just room you keep clear so something honest can walk in." She smiled. "You sound like a man who's finally learning to live instead of survive." "Maybe I am," I said, and I meant it. Autumn came early that year. The air grew sharper, the leaves brittle and gold. I started walking to the park every morning, coffee in hand, watching the kids on their way to school. One morning, a familiar car pulled up near the curb. Michael stepped out, hands in his jacket pockets, uncertain. He looked older, leaner, quieter. "Morning, Dad," he said. "Morning." "I saw you on the news," he said, half smiling. "That speech. Guess you're famous now." "Local legend. Big difference." He looked at the ground. "I didn't come for money." "I know. I just wanted to see if you'd walk with me." So we walked. No speeches, no apologies. Just two men who shared a name and too much silence. We talked about his job, about cars, about nothing. When we reached the end of the trail, he stopped. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I'm trying to earn it." "Then keep doing what you're doing," I said. "And when you're ready, maybe bring that grandchild around someday." He smiled, eyes wet. "You'd like her. She's stubborn." "Then she'll do fine." He nodded, shook my hand, firm, no tremor, and walked back to his car. I stood there a long while after he drove away, watching the dust settle over the path. That evening I told Sarah about it. "He's finding his way," I said, "and I'm finding mine." When I turned off the lights that night, I didn't feel the need to check the locks twice. The cameras blinked quietly, routine. The world outside was still uncertain, but the war inside me was over. Before bed,
I opened my notebook and wrote the last line of the last page. Freedom isn't something you win once. It's something you practice every day, like breathing, like forgiveness, like love that finally belongs to yourself. I closed the book, set it on the nightstand, and whispered into the dark, "Stand down, Major." For the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of battle.